Art, could you take these to one side, please? I need one for myself. And Mike, would you take these to the other side there? Thank you very much. Take your Bible and turn to John chapter 10, verse 10. Thank you, Brian, David, Art, Mike. Good to see you tonight. You know, here we are, the time of the year when it's dark outside early. And I don't know about you, but I'm one of those guys, one of those people that doesn't like that. I don't like when it gets dark early. You know, and of course, obviously, you know, it's just Nancy and I at our house. And so last week I said to Nancy one day, what time do you think it is? Or what does it feel like? Or something. I don't remember what she said, but I said, well, it feels like about 10:30 to me. And I think it was 7:15 or something. Anyway, it wasn't near the time that it was. Now, I said that to say that it would be really easy for, I don't want to say any of us, maybe this wouldn't be a temptation to you, but it might be to some of us. It's dark, it's wet, there might not be very many people there. I think I'll just stay home tonight. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't argue with you. You know, if you feel you need to stay home, then you stay home. But there's sometimes we feel we need to stay home, we just need to push ourselves out through the door. And some of those times when we push ourselves out through the door, then the Lord helps us to be a blessing to other people. So I know, I don't take for granted that you've come tonight or any time, and it's really good to see you. Notice in John chapter 10, verse number 10, and if you have a red letter Bible, this is red because it's the word of Jesus Christ, the words. It says, the thief cometh not but for to steal and to kill and to destroy. Who's the thief? The devil, right? I am come that they might have life, and they might have it, and that they might have it more abundantly. So here's the first fill in the blank in your notes. John 10:10 describes the kind of life which Jesus came to give Christians. Not just a dying and going to heaven. Now, I certainly don't want to minimize that at all. But also a free and a full and a meaningful life. Notice on your sheet there, after a person gets saved, they begin a transformation whereby his thinking, as found in his word, that's where you get his thinking, becomes their thinking, or maybe I should say our thinking. That, anybody want to guess on the blank there? That thinking process, Kathy, would you say? Good answers. The word I'm thinking of is that ongoing process. Now, both of what Nancy and Catherine said are true. That ongoing process is one of the most important things in the Christian life. I don't want to minimize going to church, but we have to be being transformed by the renewing of our mind. Maybe you have never had this experience. I have. I've been driving along. Then I look back in my mirror and see where I came from, and I think, I don't think I just passed that guy right there. I didn't stop at that light right there. I didn't drive by that store right there. Well, obviously I did, but my brain didn't process it. Sometimes I find myself in church doing the same thing. I think, oh man, it's time to go. And I think, well, we couldn't have been here this much time, but we were. It's just my brain sometimes is not engaged the way it should be. Well, it needs to be an ongoing process, and there's a lot of challenges to that process. If you feel the challenges, don't be too hard on yourself, because we all do. Music is one of those things, there's a lot of different opinions about it, isn't there? Jeff and I were talking about that earlier tonight. There's a lot of different opinions about music. And I realize that not everybody's opinion is mine. A lot is just preference. It comes right down to it. Some of it is just preference. One of the things I really appreciate about the Darts music is you don't have to listen long to know what the song's about. It's obvious. This is what they're talking about. And I'll say all, but I'm not thinking of any in particular, but they strike me as songs that come right out of their lives, because they do. They write them. So all of a sudden I think, oh, I know what he or she or whoever wrote that was thinking, because I have felt just like they have felt. Well, when we were singing that song tonight, Day by Day, we sang these verses. Help me, Lord, in every tribulation. Now, you know, if we're not careful, we might go, shh, we pretend there is no tribulation. Well, that's just not realistic. That's just not being honest. Life has tribulation. Life has challenges. And I don't know of anyone that doesn't, I don't think it's possible to say that transforming in my mind is all done. Catherine, did you grab these for Michael? Okay. We can't say that transformation is all done in us. If we're on this earth, we're still supposed to be being transformed by the renewing of our mind. So if you sense that some of those challenges in your life, don't be too hard on yourself, because we're all made of the same stuff. We'll see that in just a minute. So one of the challenging areas of wrong thinking is depression. Now, you may want to call it depression. You may want to call it discouragement. You can call it anything you want. You can call it a hot dog with cheese if you want to. But let's just be honest. For some people, not everyone. I remember I was at this conference one day and this preacher was preaching away. There were probably 5,000 or 6,000 people there, mostly pastors. And this preacher said, "I have never been discouraged." He said, "I have never been depressed." Well, with no disrespect intended, I'm not buying that. Let me say, of that preacher who's in heaven now, maybe him. But for most of us, that's not true. It's not true. Now, maybe you could say, "Preacher, I never get pastor. Look, Chris, I never get discouraged." Good. But I've got news for you. Most of us do. So I have this definition of depression. I don't know where I got it, and it's very clinical sounding. What would you, if someone said to you, "What is depression? What is discouragement?" You see, that word depression, we don't want to use that word because that's really bad. If you said, "I'm very depressed," people would say, "Oh." But if you said, "I'm a hot dog with cheese," and you mean the same thing, what's the difference? So what is depression anyway? What would you say it is? Kathy? Sense of hopelessness. Anyone else? Weary. Good. These are good. Anything else? Despair. Good. Despair's not good. Hopelessness is not good. But these are good. They're accurate, Mike. Feel like you're in a hole that you just can't get out of. I want to just stick my neck out and say that more Christians spend time in a similar hole than we realize. Doesn't mean we're in there long, or we might be. But there's a reason. We'll come to that in just a second. Here's this clinical definition. No idea where it came from. Depression is an emotional condition of discouragement, disillusionment, feelings of inadequacy, hopelessness, and or despair. If it's not or, we're in bad shape. And I'm not trying to be funny. It's terrible to feel this way. It's terrible. So 3 things we want to consider. We're just going to scratch the surface here tonight. Number 1, some great saints of God have had to deal with depression and discouragement. And we're going to show some Bible examples. The point is, if some of those in the Bible used of God in a great way, sometimes we're discouraged, then stop being so hard on yourself when you get discouraged. Number 2, we're going to think about some causes of depression and discouragement. And number 3, there's some biblical ways that we can deal with it. So here's number 1, some great saints of God that have suffered from depression and discouragement. The first one is Elijah. When you hear the name Elijah, anything come to your mind? Like what anything jump to your mind just when you hear the name? All right, he was caught up in a chariot of clouds. Anything else? What are you doing underneath this tree? Yeah, exactly. See, that's exactly where Art's talking is where we're going. Chapter number 19. Now, we're not going to look at it. Well, hold on. I've got the cart before the horse. We're turning to chapter 19, verses 1 to 4. Let's fill in the blank. Elijah had just come from one of the highlights of his life. It was his confrontation with the prophets of Baal. You remember what happened there? You know, he said, "Look, I'm paraphrasing, you build an altar and you put wood on it and this, whatever." And then you call fire down from Baal and see if he'll light your altar on fire. It didn't work. Then he did it, remember? And he had him pour water over it. How much water was there? I don't know. A lot. And then he prayed, and the fire came down, poof, burned the whole thing up, took the prophets of Baal down to a brook and executed them. This was one of the highlights of his life. But note what he says in chapter 19, verse 4. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a juniper tree, and he requested for himself that he might die. It is enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am not better than my fathers. He said to God, take my life. And there's a lot more to Elijah than just his confrontation with the prophets of Baal, but that's what took place just before this. So the question is, what happened? What happened? You'll notice on the next page that some Christians are prone to discouragement and depression right on the heels of a great spiritual experience or victory. We just get finished with the prophets of Baal, and we're looking for a tree to get under, and we say, Lord, just kill me. Just kill me. I can't take another step. Turn over to Psalm number 42. We're not reading all these verses for the time, but Psalm number 42, it doesn't mention David, but it's ascribed to David. If you look in the title of the psalm, I'll be there in a moment. In the title of the psalm it says, to the chief, I'm sorry, it doesn't say that either. Well, those who know about these things, identify the authors of the psalms, say that this little summary about the chief musician, Maskil for the sons of Korah, they say that means David wrote this psalm. I can't prove that, that's what they say. And in verse number 4, it says, by the way, this is the same passage. Verse 1 says, as the hart panteth after the water brook, so panteth my soul after thee, O God. Look down, if you would, at verse number 5. Why art thou cast down, O my soul? Why art thou disquieted in me? Verse 6, O my God, my soul is cast down within me. This is David, the king of Israel. Now, I don't know if he wrote this. I don't know where in his life this was written, but this is David, the king of Israel. This is David that slew Goliath, right? Yet, if this is him or whoever it is, he's showing some signs of discouragement. How about Jonah chapter number 4? When you come to Jonah chapter 4, Jonah has probably Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk. That's how I find these books. I say a few of them till I can find them. Jonah chapter number 4. If we were to go back and read chapters 1 to 3 just before this, and you're familiar with this because Jonah got swallowed by a great fish and all of that. Jonah has just come from preaching at probably the greatest citywide revival in recorded history, or evangelistic campaign, you might call it. It's a very thrilling thing when people accept Christ as their Savior. It's the Old Testament, same gospel, same God. There are little different terms used there. But Jonah's just come from that. And it says in verse 1 of chapter 4, but it displeased Jonah exceedingly, and he was very angry. This is Jonah that got swallowed by a whale, Jonah. Do you ever find life makes you very angry? Of course, we're not supposed to say that. But let's be honest about it. We're all made of the same stuff. We're going to see what the stuff is in just a second. You know, they say boys are rotten, made of cotton, girls are dandy, made of candy. Oh, no, they're not. Well, boys are rotten, but it says in verse 2, and he prayed unto the Lord and said, I pray thee, O Lord, was not this my saying when I was yet in the country? In other words, he's saying, I knew when I preached the gospel they'd get saved. I knew that was going to happen. He didn't like these people. Verse 3, middle of the verse. I beseech thee. No, I'm sorry, I got to back up. Therefore now, O Lord, take, I beseech thee, my life from me. For it is better for me to die than to live. This is Jonah. When I was in India, and I showed you a couple little pictures of this. I didn't have many, but we drove about 4.5 hours one day way up. If you look at Bhutan, which is just north of India, Nepal, if you're looking at the map this way, like you would, Bhutan is here, Nepal is here, India goes here. We were down here and drove towards the border of Bhutan, and these people had all gathered. There were about 100 people, some on the road, some hot, sort of sitting in the brush and that. And they had some native music, and these native girls did this native dance. Then they had some official there that was recognized, and they recognized us. And then I preached, and then Jim Starr preached. And after Jim Starr preached, he gave the invitation. And apparently by what he said, I wasn't looking around, apparently by what he said, 13 people had raised their hands and accepted Christ the Savior. But he didn't stop there. He said, now look, if you really got saved, you really accepted the Lord as your Savior, he said, I want you to stand up right where you are. Everyone's head bowed and he said, I want you to stand up right where you are. And he said, now there were 13 of you. There's only 6 standing, or something like that. Not my style. But pretty soon he had all 13 people standing. He said, okay, now what I want you to do is I want you to walk right up here to me, all 13 of you. Come right up here. And he got them in front of them and talked to them a little bit about reading the Bible and prayer and some things like that. These 13 people got saved. There was one man, he looked maybe he was 70. Imagine if then we went to the pastor's house and we ate, and we visited, and we got in the vehicle to drive home, like a Range Rover like that, to drive home. Imagine if we got a mile down the road and I said, Jim, I wish God would just kill me right now. Right now. He would have said, what in the world are you talking about? If I said, look, it'd be better for me if I was dead than I was alive. We would have said, boy, you're really strange. I wouldn't have been much different than Jonah in this instance. Turn over, if you would, to 1 Corinthians chapter 2. And this is the writing of the Apostle Paul. And if the truth be told, we don't tell the truth about these things because we're afraid of how we'll be judged and etc. But if the truth were told, some of the greatest preachers, I know that I can't prove this is true. I guarantee you it's true. Some of the greatest preachers of the last 100 years were given to discouragement and depression. And often right after a great victory, In 1 Corinthians 2:3 it says, and I was with you in weakness and in fear and in much trembling. Now, would you expect the Apostle Paul to say that by what we know of him? I wouldn't. That's like saying, well, look, it looks like a real mean, nasty guy out there. Michael, go out there and take care of him, would you? You're the youngest one here. I'd say, everybody sit down. Michael's going to handle this for us. I'd be feeling great. If he said, I'm a little nervous, we'd be a little bit surprised. If the cop comes and says, I'm really scared, then you need to get scared too. This is the Apostle Paul. He said, I was in weakness and fear and in much trembling. Have you ever pictured the Apostle Paul getting ready to preach and shaking because he was nervous? I never have. But essentially that's what he's saying. Turn over to 2 Corinthians chapter number 4. 2 Corinthians 4. In a few verses. Verses 8 and 9. 2 verses. It says, we are troubled on every side. Would you expect a missionary prayer letter from the Apostle Paul? Essentially, this is what this was to him. Word of God to us, but to him it was a missionary prayer letter. Would you expect a missionary prayer letter from the Apostle Paul to say, we're in trouble on every side? He goes on, we are perplexed. Verse number 8 in the middle. We're perplexed. Verse 9, we're persecuted. We're cast down. Now I realize there's some other things said here about this, but you just wouldn't expect those things. I've mentioned to you before, one day I got an email, this was a long time ago now, a couple years, from the missionary we support in the Dominican Republic, Jeff Garrison, and one of his opening sentences said, I am discouraged. Now that may not mean much to you, but I'll just say this to you. If you're a pastor and you get a prayer letter and it says, I'm discouraged, that is a missionary who's just about to quit, because you can't put that in writing. Now, should we put it in writing? Of course we should. But, I thought, man, if he wrote that, he's one step from quitting. He said, I am very discouraged. Look at chapter 7 and verse number 5. Just over a couple chapters to chapter 7, verse 5, the end of the verse. Without were fightings. Within were fears. We probably wouldn't be too hard on the Apostle Paul because there were fightings around him. But the fear within him, we might be a little bit hard on that. As I put on the paper, we might not call it depression. It might not be a pattern in our life. In other words, we all get discouraged sometimes, but this might not be a reoccurring pattern with us. It may be an every now and then thing, and may be rare. We may minimize it in our life, and we may not be susceptible to it. There probably are those people who nothing discourages them. There are some people who their house could fall down around them, and they're going to sleep like a baby. It won't bother them a bit. Why? A piece is going to fall down in the night, they're just going to push it off on the floor and keep on sleeping. Other people can wake up at night and stay awake, thinking through all the things they need to do on their house. And they could make a list of 100, 200, 300 things. But the average person would come and say, I don't see anything that needs to be done here. It's because we're not all the same. We're not all wired the same. But if you go back to chapter 4, verse 7, there's the answer to what the stuff we're made of. 2 Corinthians 4:7. It says, but we have this treasure in earthen vessels. When I looked this word earthen up in my Greek dictionary, it actually said terracotta. Good stuff, not very tough. Right? It literally means made of clay. The implication is, as I put in the notes, we're frail. It's what it means. It's because it's not what we're made of. We're in earthen vessels. There's some things you can slip and drop them. They'll bounce right off the floor and back to you. But not a clay pot. Not going to happen. It's going to be all over the place. You ever dropped one of those things that you thought, how could one thing break in this many pieces? That's the implication of earthen vessels. So, in the Word of God, there are some great saints of God that battled with this. We could call it discouragement, we could call it depression, you can call it anything you want. My point in saying that is, let's just not deny that some of us struggle with this. Number 2, let's talk about some causes, and we're only going to look at one tonight. Turn back with me to 1 Kings chapter 19. I should have had you keep your finger in there. 1 Kings chapter 19. This is Elijah, where we were. And this is after the prophets of Baal. So here's number A, letter A. There's some physical causes. There are some physical reasons people get discouraged. There are some physical reasons people get depressed. Here's the first one, and the only one we're going to talk about tonight. It's the matter of fatigue. It's the matter of fatigue. The example here is Elijah. We already read what he was thinking. This is where he said, he got under a tree and he said, Lord, in verse 4, take away my life. It's better for me if I wasn't alive. I'm not any better than my fathers. I don't measure up to the ones who came before me. Now notice what happened in verse number 5. It says, as he lay and slept under a juniper tree. What's the first thing he did? He slept. Does that sound very spiritual to you? It doesn't to me, but that's what he did. He slept. Notice what he did in verse 6. And he looked, an angel wakes him up at the end of verse 5 and says, arise and eat. And he looked, and behold, there was a cake baking on the coals and a cruse of water at his head. And he did eat and drink. So after this angel woke up, he saw some food and beverage, so he ate and he drank. Then what did he do? He slept again. Now, the guy who goes and takes a nap, gets up and has a drink and a sandwich, and then says, I need to sleep some more. Many of us would say, poor fella. There's not a hint here of correction of him. He's exhausted is what he is. He came from defying the prophets of Baal, sat down and thought about it and said, man, I'd be better off if I was dead. I'm no better than my fathers. And then he fell asleep. Angel woke him up. There's some food and drink. He has it. He falls asleep. Verse 8, what did he do? He arose and did eat and drink. He woke up and ate and drank again. So just picture it. First, you lay down and sleep because you're so tired. You wake up and you think, I need to have a sandwich and something to drink. Then when you're done having your sandwich and something to drink, you lay down and take a sleep again. Then after you wake up again, you say, you know what I need? I need a snack. The guy's tired. He's tired. So notice what I put there. We're not machines that can do anything and everything. We're not. We're not going to turn to Mark chapter 6, verse 30 and 31, but that passage is where the disciples returned to Jesus and told them, you need to come apart and rest a while. All right, here's the blanks to fill in at the end. We need to know and adjust to our physical selves. Do you know there's only one thing I know of that I admire about President Clinton? Although I'll be honest with you, every day that passes, he looks better all the time. Compared to what we've got going on now, sorry. I don't think President Obama is an evil man. I don't think he's a Muslim. Maybe he is. I don't think so. I don't think he hates Americans. Maybe he does. I think the problem is he has no idea what he's doing. He has no idea what he's doing. That's just my opinion. I think they said, Mr. President, we got a bad economy problem. Well, what'll fix it? Well, we just need to throw money at it, and we'll call it a stimulus. He said, okay, where do you want to throw it? They said, don't worry about it. We'll throw it all over the place. It'll fix this economy. I honestly believe he gets up at night and says, they told me if we threw that money all over here. By the way, do you know what the headline is this evening? They're expecting by the fall, between 50 and 100 million insurance policies to be canceled. President Clinton's looking better all the time. Exactly. Even his wife. But there's something I really admire about President Clinton. Do you know they say that he gets by on 4 hours sleep a night? They say that President Clinton regularly only has 4 hours of sleep a night. They said when he was in the White House, he'd go to bed at 11, get up at 3, and pick up the phone and start calling, talking to his advisors, talking to people we don't want to talk about who he was talking to. I have news for you. Most of us cannot do that. Most of us can't think about doing that. We need to know and adjust to our physical self. I'm not asking you to tell me, but do you know how many hours of sleep you need a night? Do you know how many hours, if you don't get that on a regular basis, you'll start to feel it? Do you know? 7? There you go. Angela knows. So, Angela, how many nights of, say, 5 would it have to be before you would know, I'm not feeling right here? Oh, you need 7 and you're getting 5. You doze in the evening. You know, Nancy's father always used to say to me, I can't understand why a young man like you takes a nap. Now he sits down in his chair after lunch, falls asleep, wakes up about 2 hours later, and feels as fit as a fiddle. We need to know and accept our rest requirements. We need to know them and accept them. The next one, we need to know God's priorities for us. This is really tough for some of us. We need to know God's priorities for us. The Lord doesn't expect us to do everything. Last one there, they're not numbered. We need to avoid what? Comparing. We need to avoid comparing ourselves to others. So easy to say, what do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean you don't get up until 8 o'clock? What do you mean? I get up every day at 4:42. What do you mean? What do you mean? Really, really tough one, I'll tell you, for some people in the ministry and the way we are wired. Just the way we're wired. Do you know that my brain thinks, it took me to 54 to realize this, my brain thinks everything that needs to be done could be done today if I just did it better. Let me say that again. My brain thinks that everything that needs to be done could have been done today if I just did it better. Now, some of you are thinking, well, that's ridiculous. And let me give you a little hint. It is ridiculous. But some of you are thinking, are you crazy? That's a crazy way to think. Do you know why? Because if your brain works like that, there's no end to the list of things that need to be done. There's no end. So you think everything should be all finished all the time. I'm not by any means advocating laziness. One time I was teaching in India and I was talking to the pastors I was teaching about the importance of taking a day off. And I was spoken to about that and told not to tell them that anymore. They said, you should not be telling these pastors they need a day off. I said, really? I said, why is that? They said, because they're lazy and they don't need to be told to take a day off. I said, well, let me tell you something. The Bible says of Jesus, he went apart and he rested a while. I said, it is wrong to tell God's servants that they should not take a day for rest. You know, 1 day out of 7, Sabbath, 7th day, all that. It's right in the Word of God. But the point I want to emphasize as we turn our attention to our prayer list is what we can do, everybody else can't do. Or maybe what they can do, we can't do. Maybe we can't do what they can do. So some people are discouraged. Some people get depressed because they're way, way overtired. They're tired. They're overworked. This is not the only, there's a lot more to this about depression, but in some cases, we had to sort of lay a little foundation here. In some cases, the problem is that we need to rest. Okay, any comments about that? Depression, discouragement, and rest. Just that much for tonight. Any comments, questions about that? Yeah. I want to ask you, Angel, and you don't have to answer this. You could say, I'd rather not say. That would be perfectly fine. What helped her to get better? Yeah. Okay, that's okay. Okay, so in the United Kingdom, a tablet is medicine. Okay? Angela said, well, it was tablets of medicine. Now, let's just be careful about something. let's not apologize that medicine helped her. Because, sometimes in the Christian community, if you say, well, I wasn't thinking right, my brain wasn't firing right, and the doctor gave me some medication to help my brain fire right, we'd go, are you kidding? He takes medicine? Well, what if I had a toothache? Would you think it was bad then? What if thank God I'm not going to be able to have a baby. But what if I could and I said, I'm going to have this baby with no pain medication whatsoever? How many of you women would say, well, you're crazy? You don't want it. Mike, he's not a woman. Yeah, you're crazy. So, Angela, she was able to take some tablets and a lot of prayer. From the time there were any signs of her being, whatever you want to call it, discouraged, depressed, whatever word you want to use, the word doesn't really matter to me, to the time she could say, I'm better. How long do you think that might have been? Well over a year. Yeah. I'm not surprised. Nothing against your granddaughter at all. Your daughter, I'm sorry. But, well, any other, before I don't want to dominate time. Any thoughts you have here? Comments, questions, suggestions, your opinion, your thoughts? Nobody? Kathy, go ahead. You would agree, Kathy, not always that, but sometimes it is. So if your car had spark plug wires, and I went out and unplugged one, right? So now your 4 cylinders now has got 3, but you get problems. Your 6 cylinders got 5, your 8 cylinders got 5. There's only one thing going to help it. Hooking it back up so it'll fire right. And sometimes the medication, and I don't want to sound like an expert on this because I'm not, but the medication that's needed hooks the wire back up and helps the signals go right. We should be very, very careful about condemning something we might not understand. Now look, I'll tell you the other side of the coin. I've dealt with a lot of Christian people. They're addicted. They're addicted. And I'll just tell you, it's not hard to get addicted. So I'm sorry that I have to tell you this, but like back when I had my colonoscopy, sorry, the nurse said to me, oh, Chris, you lay there, and they're going to put this thing in your arm, and then you're going to feel a little bit of burning. She said it burns a little, and she said, you're going to take the best nap you ever had in your life. The next time you wake up, it'll all be over. You won't know a thing. So, when I went back for my follow-up, that was the doctor's nurse at his office who wasn't part of the actual in the hospital deal. When I went back to the office, they got to have you come back for a follow-up to check and see if you're okay so they can bill you another $156 or whatever when you're perfectly well. But anyway, and look, this healthcare thing is a disaster, but there is a healthcare problem, and I'm not sure the other side's got the answer either. There is a problem. There's a definite problem. It's easy to throw stones and say something doesn't work, but I'll tell you, there's a problem. Doctors can almost do what they want, charge what they want, send you for this test, that test, the other test, this test, that test. If you say to a doctor, by the way, are you going to change what you're going to do based on the results of this test? No, I just want the results. I'd say to my doctor, well, I'm not having it. If it's not going to change your treatment, why are we doing this? Anyway, there I sit in the doctor's office. In comes that same lady. I don't remember her name. She said, Chris, how you doing? I said, great. How you feeling? Great. Any residual effects of your colonoscopy? Nope. She said, was it like I told you? She said, did you not have the best nap of your whole life? I said, yes, I did. And then this is what she said to me. She said, that's the stuff Michael Jackson was having injected into him when he died. She said, a doctor gave him that by intravenous to sleep whenever he needed to sleep. You know what I said to her? I can see why. It's very easy to become addicted. Very, very easy. Could happen to anybody. So you have two sides of the coin. You have two sides of the coin there. Let me just close with this on this subject, and that is that this is just my opinion, but Angela and David's daughter bears this out to me, and I don't know her. One of the biggest helps to a lot of people, not always, this doesn't always do it, and I don't want to sound like some expert, I'm not, is patience and time. Patience and time. If you walk in the bedroom of a depressed person and you throw open the door and say, look, first of all, you're a Christian, so you shouldn't be depressed. Oh, I was just pulling the curtain open for him. You shouldn't be depressed. You get yourself out of that bed and you get yourself going, because there's no excuse for this. Let's go. The person may be well-meaning, but if that person's really struggling with discouragement, depression, that is going to make them worse. They can't do what we just said. They can't just get it all together and be better. You get up in the morning, you be better. You understand me? You better be better by the morning. Doesn't quite happen like that. So sometimes, not always, sometimes the problem is what we're calling tonight fatigue. Fatigue. I went to the hospital one time in Maine, and I said to the lady, I wanted to see my doctor, but he was on call at the emergency room, so I went in, and I said to the lady at the desk, I said, is Dr. Garcia here? She said, he is. He's the doctor on call here. Small hospital. He's the doctor on call. He's here. I said, well, he's my doctor, and I'd like to see him. She said, what's your problem? I said, well, both of my hands are numb, and I'm having pains up my arm. And it crosses over the other side. They come and go. I never saw her do anything, but pretty soon there was a wheelchair there. And she said, you need to sit down in that wheelchair right there. I said, okay, so I did. They wheeled me off to this room. They said, can you get out of that chair and get on the table? Sure. So they start doing their thing. Off go your shoes, off goes your shirt, and in comes this one, in comes that one, in comes another. This is where I met Frank, the guy who he said to me, what do they call you? I said, what do they call you? Do you remember me telling that story? He said, I said, they call me Chris, people not from our church. He said, well, they call me Frank. I said, okay, Frank, I'm Chris, what's going on? He said, you either just had a heart attack or you're getting ready to. He said, but I have good news, you're at the right place. There were nurses coming, I could hear them paging my Dr. Garcia was his name, paging Dr. Garcia. And pretty soon this lady comes around the corner of the door with a bunch of stuff and looks at me and looks at Frank. And Frank said to her, do you know Reverend Luppino? She said, yes, I do. It's my daughter's pastor. Frank said, maybe you better set that stuff down and go back out, because we think he's having a heart attack. No, I can help. She stayed. Well, to make a long story short, about 24 hours later, after I spent the night in the hospital, miserable night in the hospital, spent a night in the hospital, Dr. Garcia is sitting next to my bed. He said, look, we monitored your heart all night. He said, I don't think you have any heart trouble at all. He said, so here's what I've done. I've scheduled a stress test for you for Friday. This is Wednesday. He said, I scheduled a stress test for you on Friday. He said, come in the morning, Dr. So-and-so will give you the stress test. He said, if you pass, throw these nitroglycerin tablets in the trash and go on vacation. He said, between now and then, if you get any of that pain back, take one of these. If it doesn't make the pain go away, take another one. He said, if you take 3, you need to get back to the hospital. It's about 15 miles away. He said, you need to get back to the hospital. He said, I don't think you have heart trouble. He said, I don't think there's anything wrong with your heart at all. He said, I think the problem here is stress. What should I do, doctor, between now and Friday? He said, this is what I want you to do. I want you to go home. He said, I want you to get in bed, and I don't want you to get out of that bed unless you absolutely have to. So now I've got the doctor's permission to go home and sleep in the middle of the afternoon. I went home, got in bed. I slept from Wednesday afternoon till Friday morning and don't remember getting up at all. I must have got up, but I don't remember it, didn't eat. I don't remember getting up at all because I had his permission. The doctor said sleep. Some people don't need to be told that. For some of us, these things can be a struggle for us. I did take the stress test. Dr. Nessen said, what did Garcia tell you to do if you pass the test? He said, he told me to take these nitroglycerin pills, throw them in the trash and go on vacation. He said, the trash can is right there. He said, you don't have heart trouble. I went just like that and clunk into the trash it went. For many people, that would be like just basic. That would be like life 101. They would say, why would you need a doctor to give you permission to go sleep? It's because we're not all wired the same. That's why. We're not all wired the same. Okay, let me point out a few prayer requests to you. You know Karen. She left today to go visit her family in New England. She'll be gone for a couple weeks. Dolly Stevens is Michael Stevens' mother, you know, our missionary to the gypsies of Romania, and Walter Stevens' wife, because Walter, Michael's father's also preached here. Dolly's been being treated for cancer for quite a number of years, and not too long ago they told her she had no tumors in her lungs. Now she does, and they're large, I think is the way it was worded. Is that what it said, Nancy? And they're large. So Dolly's begun chemotherapy. Jenna Ridgstrom is Carol's daughter. Jenna has many, many serious health challenges. Juan is taking the teens out doing some outreach this Saturday, passing out some literature from the church. I don't know much about this, but the Helm family, the missionaries we support to India, had a car accident. No one was injured in the accident, but they totaled their van. And that's all I know about it. I got that from Pastor Joe because they're good friends. That's about all the information he has. Dale Cook had his surgery today for his hernia. Surprising, because he was feeling very under the weather Sunday, but he had his surgery. Gail called this afternoon, and he was recovering well. She almost thought the doctor was going to send him home today, but they're going to wait till tomorrow. And then we're just need to begin praying for God's direction concerning our mission support in 2014. These other prayer requests are familiar to you. I'm not going to read them, but I'm glad to have you speak of them. Update us. Something you'd like us to be praying for, add to the list. Felicia, your hand is first.